I'm Mayer Simcha Stromer. Growing up, I was always like enamored by Rebbe Nachman. I always heard about him. I never learned about him too much growing up, and even now, I'm not someone who knows a ton of, Breslov Torah, but it's a world that I'm always intrigued by. It's something that I spoke to my Rabbonim about, and it's something that, if you look around, there's so many people, drinking from the Torahs, the waters of Rebbe Nachman, that it's something that I always found myself thinking, like, I need to get more into it. They say a story about the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim was once walking with the Imre Emes, and the Imre Emes was holding the Noam Elimelech. He's holding the Sefer Noam Elimelech, and the Chavetz Chaim said to the Imre Emes, "What is it?" And he says, Noam Elimelech, Rebbe Elimelech Luzhensk. What do you mean? And so he says, "Well, who is he?" He's like, "What the Gra is to you." So Noam, the Noam Elimelech, Rebbe Elimelech is to the Hasidim. So the Chavetz Chaim grabbed the Sefer, and he started like flipping the pages furiously, and he started to cry. He says, I don't understand it. It doesn't make so much sense to me. But if it's that important to you, then I need to understand it, right? And I think that story, like when you see so many people connecting to Rebbe Nachman in such a profound way, how many thousands of people go every year to Uman and Rosh Hashanah and things like that. So to me, it was always something so compelling. I know a lot of people are very quick to kind of poo-poo it and say it's not what we do, it's not our Masorah. I was never someone like that. I always think like you can always look for the positives and there's always what to gain. And for sure, even the little bits of Rebbe Nachman that I've been exposed to. I remember my first exposure to Rebbe Nachman was learning Reish Pei Beis in Shalavim on a late Thursday night Mishmar with a good friend of mine, Jared Rosenfeld, and Jacob Rosenfeld. And so it was always something that was intriguing. So I want to start with the following. So he says in Likutei Moharan, in Tinyan, in the second Chelek, in Torah Yud, he says the following: Masha ha'olam rechokim. Sorry, I don't have makoros for everybody, but we'll read slowly and I'll translate. Masha ha'olam rechokim me Hashem yisparach. That which we're all distant, not we all, but at times we feel distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and maybe writ large, the world is a little bit distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're not as God conscious as maybe we should be. Ve'ina miskarvim me love yisparach. Right? He's saying two things, and I remember Moshe Weinberger once told him, I was talking to him about learning Rebbe Nachman, and he said that if he reads the more popular contemporary Hasidic Sfarim, so stuff like Rav Kluger and Shira Rav and different things like that, he says he blitzes through them. He reads it, he swims through it. He says when he reads Rebbe Nachman, he said he's medayik in every single word, like a brisker reads a Rambam. And I thought that was very interesting. So, l'shem that, we'll try to be medayik a little bit. He says, Masholam rachokim Hashem yisparach ve'ina miskarvim elav yisparach. It's kind of, if you're rachok, then obviously you're not miskarif to him. So, but Rebbe Nachman is saying that people are distant, and they're not even like trying maybe to come close to him, right? They're apathetic in a way, and they're not even trying to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hu rak machmas she'in lahem yishuv hadas ve'in miyashmem atzman. It's because they lack yishuv hadas. They don't have a sense of, what's a good word for yishuv hadas in English? I never had a good one.
Tranquility, I
like that. Right there, maybe equanimity also, is that a good word? I don't really know what that means. No, not the right word. Okay, tranquility, we're going to go with them, right? So they have a sense of tranquility, and things are balanced, and things are good. So people lack Yeshiva Das Bizman Hazem. Because of that, we're not close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're either Rachok, or we're not even trying to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which is interesting, just that line in and of itself. That Yeshiva Das, the lack of Yeshiva Das, is what prevents people from coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now that could be because there are a million things that we're trying to accomplish in life, and we have so many different things, and we have children, and we have grandchildren, and we have work, and we have this, and we have that. We have so many things that are going on in our lives that we can never really focus on keeping the main thing, so to speak. And we'll come back to that idea of keeping the main thing in just a little bit. But he says like this: V'ha'ikar lehishtadol liyashev atzmo etiv ma hatachlis mikol hataybos mikol inyanei ha'olam hazeh. The ikar, the main thing for us to do, is to work and to focus, to be miyashiv ourselves, right? From the tachlis, meaning recognize what you need to do and recognize what's not necessary, all the taivos and all the different distractions and everything going on in our lives that are really pulling us away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, taking us away from that proper focus. That's something that we need to strive to do. I remember Rav Judah Michel was in Chicago a little bit ago. Have you heard of Rav Judah Michel? He's the director of Camp Hask, and he's a big Mashgiach in Israel. So I was talking with him on Erev Shabbos, and we were talking about what he called pocket presence. Right? I don't know if anybody's a football fan here. I saw a J.J. Watt t-shirt before, but they often talk about like what separates the good quarterbacks from like the best quarterbacks. You know, because to a degree, if you're in the NFL, you have the arm strength. Right? You can throw the ball. You have to be pretty accurate to be in the NFL. But something that really separates the good and the great is the notion of pocket presence, right? When you have, you know, the linebacker coming at you from this way and the defensive end coming at you from this way, and your offensive linemen are moving the pocket. The pocket is changing as you're kind of stepping up there, so you have to know to take a step forward, to take a step to the right. You know, when Tom Brady retired, and then before he unretired, right? So they were saying, oh, what made Brady the greatest quarterback of all time? It's because he had, you know, unmatched pocket presence. He very rarely got sacked. He always knew when to get rid of the ball quickly. And there was even a mic'd up, like one of these videos where they have the players who are wearing like a little mic, so you hear them talking during the game. And there's this defensive end on the Chargers, doesn't matter, but the point is that he was saying that every single time, he had two hands on Brady, like at the end of the play, and Brady never had the ball. And he said, I'm going to get you. Or Brady said to him, he's like, you keep coming at me. He's like, you just get rid of the ball too quickly, though. Like, I'm never going to be able to sack you because you're... But this notion of pocket presence, or Judah was saying that there's a movie, I forget who's, maybe Denzel Washington, I forget who, with maybe it's called The Assassin, I don't know. The point of the movie is that there is this guy who is an assassin. And he says, right before he's about to do his hit, or whatever that is, so the entire room slows down. And you see his watch. Like,
the equalizer.
The equalizer, thank you, that's what it is, yes. Yeah. You can like Google, like, go on YouTube and watch this like one scene. And like this hit scene, like his watch slows down and everybody's moving much slower, and he's able to, and in real time everything's crazy, everything's happening quickly. But when you know what your tafkid is, when you know what your avoda is, when you know this guy is going to equalize, he's going to do his job, so everything slows down, right? And that's, says Rebbe Nachman, that's really the main avoda. Ve'ikr l'hishtad liyashiv atzmo heitiv mahatachlis mikol ataybos mikol inyanei holam hazeh. The different desires that we have, the different temptations that are out there, the different things that we need to take care of in Yanei Olam Hazeh, whether it's carpools or whether it's making dinner, whether it's giving the kids bath. There are a million things we have to do and that we're supposed to be doing. But he says sometimes, because we get so involved in what we, you know, all the things that are like coming at us, so we lack that pocket presence. And because of that, we lack that Yeshiva Hadas. But he says, Ba'az bevada yashuv el Hashem. If we have that Yeshiva Hadas, so then Memela will come back, will connect to HaKadosh Baruch. And I want to use that as a little bit of a departure point. I always go back to the Parsha, especially these weeks. I'm a teacher during the year, so I can spend a little bit more time on the Parshios, you know, in the summers. So I looked at the Parsha and I saw something fascinating. This past week's Parsha in Matos, so we talk about Nidarim. The Torah tells us, Ish ki yidur neder laHashem, or a person makes a shvua, right? So the Torah tells us, Lo yachel devaro kechol hayotzim mepiv ya'aseh. So what does that mean? A person takes a neder that, I don't know, I'm not saying this because I'm going to drink my Gatorade, but let's say, Lamashal, I'm never going to drink, I don't know, red Gatorade ever again, right? Or I'm never going to drink it for the next month, right? So that can have a real halachic chalos, right? That becomes a real halachic reality, so much so that if I were to drink it, that's a real avera. That's a crazy thing. We can create new mitzvos, or we can create new averos. And it's a fascinating thing how that works. But the Kli Yakar says something amazing. And it fits so nicely. The Kli Yakar says, how do you take a neder? Meaning, the Torah says, Ish ki yidur neder laHashem, and a woman can take a neder also. But the Kli Yakar and other Mefarshim want to know, why is it dafka an Ish? Why is it not an Adam? Right, that might be like a simple question, or it might be like a question we've never even thought of, because like, okay, who cares? Ish, Adam, it's the same thing, right? But the Mefarshim always pick up on this. The Mefarshim and the Balei Musar also say, like, what's an Adam, but what's an Ish? Like, what's a mesh? What defines a person? So the Kli Yakar says that in order to take a neder that has any sort of lasting impact, you have to have Yishuv Hadas. Without Yishuv Hadas, so then your words don't have the same impact. They don't have the same efficacy. Because you're not appreciating what you're saying, right? Because the third parak in the Gemara in Nidarim, the Mishnayos and the Gemaras in Nidarim talk about a person can take a neder bekas, or a person can take a neder, you know, when they're frustrated or aggravated or they're stressed out, and because of that, you're not really thinking about what you're saying. How many times have you know, you got upset, you flew off the handle, you said someone, maybe it was a spouse, maybe it was a child, maybe it was someone at work, a colleague, you say something, right? I don't want to ask you what you've said to your little brother when you've been upset one time, right? Like, I'm never going to talk to you again, right? And you slam the door, right? Something like that, right? So that could be a neder, right? You're never allowed to talk to your brother again? For real? No way. What do you mean? You're going to talk to him in an hour, right? You're going to calm down, he's going to calm down, everyone's going to be okay, and then you're going to talk to your brother. So why is that not a neder? You said I'm never going to talk to you again. Why is that any different than saying I'm never going to drink red Gatorade? So the Gemara says that if you take a neder bekas, or if you take a neder when you're frustrated or anything like that, so it doesn't have the same impact. And the idea is, when we're frustrated, when there's what we would call pizor hanefesh, when we're not in that state of tranquility, like we said, when you don't have Yeshiva das, so you can't fully appreciate your words. You don't even think about what they really mean. You say stuff, we say stuff, I say stuff without thinking, and you don't appreciate who it's going to offend. You don't appreciate what it's going to do. And because of that, your words don't have the same power. So says the Kliyakar right away that a mensch is someone who has Yeshiva das. Anytime I think about Yeshiva das, I think about the following vart. It's such an awesome vart. And if we say Pesukei Zimmer every day, right? If we get to shul in time, we have to say enough of Pesukei Zimmer. We don't have to skip too much. So there's an amazing vart in Shlach, in Parshas Bishalach. So we go through the Yam Suf and we sing Shira. So if you look at the Shira, there's a very interesting parallel in the Pesukim. It says twice, it says that we were on dry land within the sea. But it flips. At one point it says, B'yabasha b'sochayam. And the other time it says, b'sochayam b'yabasha, right? B'sochayam b'yabasha, b'yabasha b'sochayam. So what's the difference? So Rav Moshe Sternbach writes, the Av Bezdin, the Ede Charedis in Yerushalayim, so he has the following vart, and it's so good. He says there's certain people, right? Yabasha is when it's dry, it's calm, things are good. Mayim, and especially the Yam specifically, the Arizal and many of the Svarim HaKadoshim talk about how the Yam represents chaos and craziness and taiva and olam hazeh and things of that nature. Yabasha is things are good, things are calm, you're able to be settled, and at the sea, things are crazy. So he says there's certain people that are b'yabasha b'sochayam, right? And there are other people who are b'sochayam b'yabasha. So if you're b'sochayam, but you're able to be b'yabasha, that's an amazing level. A person can be in a state or in a situation where on paper it should be crazy and it should be chaotic and it should be hard to find a state of tranquility. But there's certain people who have that pocket presence. And there's certain people who, even if they're b'sochayam, they're b'yabasha. But there are other people who are the exact opposite. Even when they're b'yabasha, they find ways to be b'sochayam. And things are good, things are calm. Families over, Baruch Hashem, these things are things that we should be happy about. Or it's Yontif and it's amazing. And we all know how crazy Yontif is. It seems like as much as, Yontif should be beautiful, we always seem to be, b'sochayam when it comes to Yontif, or at least Yontif prep, right? But the idea is that if we can be someone who's more b'yabasha, regardless of what's going on in life, right? That's what Yeshiv Hadas is, and I'm always drawn to people who have Yeshiv Hadas, right? Like when I always tell my friend, like when I would meet with my Rabbonim, whether it's Rav Weinberger or whether I would meet with Rav Yaakov Neuberger Shlita, different people, big people, I always find that they have an ability to just always be calm. Anytime there's one person he's a Rav and I'm not really a rabbi, but I teach in school and stuff, and I have students who text me shaylas or things that come up. So I'll call this one friend of mine. He's a little bit older. He's been a Rav for a lot longer than I have. But I'll call him, and the first thing he says to me is okay, calm down. Right? I tell him a shayla, and I think it's an amazing, it's a crazy case or whatever it is, and the first thing he says to me is okay, chill out. Just calm down for a second. But that's his ability to be b'yabasha. Right? So I just want to say the vart over, because I think it's such a powerful idea. We're talking about Yeshiva Das a little bit. So in Oz Yashir, it says b'yabasha b'sochayam, and it says b'sochayam b'yabasha. So Rav Moshe Sternbach says that there are people, right? The yam always represents chaos and craziness and crashing waves and things like that. And yabasha is dry land, you're able to walk calmly and things like that. So Rav Moshe Sternbach writes that there are people who are, even if they're b'sochayam, they're able to be b'yabasha. Even if things are crazy around them, they have the ability to have pocket presence, right? They're able to be calm, they're able to understand what they need to do. They understand that there are a lot of people to deal with and a lot of things that they need to take care of and all different balls that they need to juggle, but they know what they're doing. They know their tafkid. That's what we started with from Rebbe Nachman. And then there are people who unfortunately, no matter what's going on, even if they're b'yabasha, they're really b'sochayam, no matter what's going on around them. We have to have this ability to be b'yabasha. So I wanna veer off a little bit, and we're gonna come back to Nedarim because I think it's very, very cool. the Kli Yakar tells us like this. After he says that in order to take a neder, you have to have Yeshiva Das. The only way you can be an Ish, right? The only way you can be a real mensch, Ish ki yidar neder la'Hashem, is if you have Yeshiva Das. But then he says like this. If you learn Maseches Nedarim, it's a funny thing. Because throughout Maseches Nedarim, peppered into the Masechta are lines that you shouldn't take Nedarim. Right? So we have a whole Masechta. And yet the Gemara tells us in Daf Chaf Beis that if you take a neder, it's like you built a Bama. You built a Mizbeach outside the Beis HaMikdash. What's going on? Right? Like my father-in-law told me he grew up in Detroit, and some of the people of, let's say, the more right-wing community, they don't want to build an Eruv. They said it was like too crazy. No, we can't do it. And so my grandfather-in-law, who was a Rav in Detroit, was like, I don't understand. There's a Masechtas Eruvin. Like, we can figure out how to build an Eruv. They're like, no, it's too complicated. He's like, well, why are you taking out a Masechta in Shas? Like, let's learn the Masechta. It's difficult. No one said it's easy, but let's figure it out. So it's funny, like you learn Nedarim, it's like, okay, now I know how should I say something, I shouldn't say something, and by the way, if you do it, you're a huge bum. Right? Like you build the bumma. And not only that, right? Our example before, if I take a neder that I'm gonna, drink this bottle of Gatorade or something like that, and I'm makayim my neder, if I actually fulfill what I said I'm gonna do, not only is it like I built the bumma, but it's like I brought a carbon on the bumma, which is a terrible thing. So it's so funny because the Torah tells us, lo yachel devaro, do not profane your words. Whatever you said has real impact, right? So if I say I'm going to drink this, I need to drink it. Whatever I say, I have to do. But yet it's telling me if I say that and then I do it, I follow through, I'm building a bama and I'm bringing a car. It doesn't seem to make sense. So the Kli Yakar says there are actually two categories of nedarim. And really what he says is there are two types of people who make nedarim. He says there's a rasha. Now, I don't think he really means like an evil person per se, right? I think he just means a rasha is someone who, what he says is a bal gaiva. And he says someone who, as we said before, you can take a neder bekas. You didn't mean to say, I'm never going to speak to you again. You never said, I'm never going to come to your house again. I'm never going to call you again. You just flew off the handle and you said something that you didn't really appreciate. So that doesn't have the same efficacy because you're not appreciating exactly the words that you're saying. But it goes deeper than that because what is kas? What is anger? What's the source? What's the root midah of anger? Why do people get angry? So, says the Kli Yakar, V'tamol shel davar hu. What's the reason for this? Sheyarda haTorah l'sof das hanoder. The Torah understands the person taking the neder. Ki hu oser al atzmo ma shekol ha'olam nohagin bo heter. You're taking a neder to aser something on yourself. I'm never going to drink blue Gatorade ever again. Everyone else in the room can drink blue Gatorade. Why am I doing that? Mistama rum livavo. Hisiu shemikol ha'eda yibadel. Says the Kli Yakar, you think you're firmer than everybody else. You think you're better than everybody else. When a person takes a neder, it's usually coming, he says, from a state of gaiva. That you think you're better than I hold myself to a higher standard. You guys all have 613 mitzvahs. You know what? I have 614 now because I'm not allowed to drink this. This is usher to me like chazer, like pig. And he says something so amazing that I never ever would have thought of. A person who takes a neder, why is it so bad? Because you're being motzi es atzno min haklal. You're no longer part of Klal Yisrael. You have a different Torah. You're doing something completely different, which is fascinating. But he says that's not for everybody. Again, it's someone who takes it bekas or begaiva. The Gemara tells us in Masechah Sota that a person who is a kasan, someone who gets angry, so it's also like they build a bama. Every time a person gets angry, they're building a bama and they're worshiping Avodah Zarah there. Why is that? What's gaiva? Gaiva, the notion of arrogance is in this inappropriate. There's a notion of confidence, and that's a good type of gaiva to have. We're not talking about that right now. But kas and gaiva, it stems from this place of like, what do you mean? I have to get what I want. Someone cuts you off the road. How can that person do it to me? You're waiting online at the bank and it's taking too long. Right? Like my time is more valuable than the guy standing in front of me. Right? Every time, I would imagine if you could go through every single step. I feel like everyone here doesn't get angry. I'm talking about myself mostly. But when I get angry, I would say 9 out of 10 times I'm angry. If I really pause and reflected for half a second, it's probably because I'm being a bagaiva. And I think that my time or my desire, whatever it is, whatever I want to do is more important than the person next to me or in front of me or behind me. He says that's what gaiva is. That's what kas is. It's the same idea. It's the same midah. And a person taking a neder, so they're doing the same thing. They think they're better. They think they're firmer than everybody else, and therefore they're motzi es atzmo min haklal, which I think is an amazing thing. I think it's even amazing if you zoom out and say for Bamidbar, it's a fascinating thing. The Netziv says in his introduction to Sefer Bamidbar that this is really the transition for the Jewish people. We're going from the Midbar to Eretz Yisrael. We're going from a state of being Lamala Min HaTeva. We have the Be'er, we have the Man, we have, the Anani HaKavod. Things are unreal. We're learning from Moshe Rabbeinu, like sitting in the shade of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we're about to go into Eretz Yisrael. We're going to have to roll our sleeves up. We're going to have to work the land. We're going to have to develop like a agricultural infrastructure, and it's going to be a lot more difficult. And we're not going to be able to like sit back in the Anani HaKavod with our glass of Be'er water and just chill for a little bit. It's not going to be the same. So the Netziv develops this theme throughout Sefer Bamidbar, but I think even within that, I think you can take it to another level, because if you go through Sefer Bamidbar and the Parshios within Sefer Bamidbar, so then what is it? It's really interesting. I think it's a cautionary tale of being someone who what? Being someone who has an excessive sense of individuality. Right? Go through the Parshios that we have. You have Korach, and you have Bilam, and you have the Meraglim at the beginning of the Sefer. There are people who think that they're maybe better than everybody else, and they can be doing their own thing. And then you have Pinchas, who wanted to do something. You have Benos Tzlavchid, the women who said, we want a real chelek, but they all went to Moshe Rabbeinu before they asked. They said, is this something that fits within the context and the confines of the Torah? Is this something that we should be doing? So going into what? Going into Eretz Yisrael, where we're going to have the Shvatim, and everybody's going to have their own chelek in the land. And in a way, it's going to be very chevrati and amami, as Rav Kook talks about. It's going to be this notion of the nation of Klal Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and everybody has their land. There's a sense of amamiyut, but there's also a notion of being an individual. How do you fit in within the Klal? And that's what Bamidbar is. So of course it makes sense then that what? At the very end of Bamidbar, we're learning about Nidarim. And the Kli Yakar is saying that a person takes a neder in an inappropriate way, right? In a skewed type of perspective that this person has in life, you're being motzias atmu from a Klal. But there's another level to that, because he says there are people who take Nidarim, and that's good, right? Because the Gemara has other lines that it's okay to take a neder, right? You should take a neder, you can take a neder. And he says that is a neder LaHashem. That's why the pasuk says, Ish ki yidur neder LaHashem. It's a neder LaHashem, you're doing a l'shem shemayim. It's not because I think I'm firmer than everybody else. It's because this is the right thing to do. Now, what does that mean it's the right thing to do? I want to talk about that for a second, because I think it's fascinating. The Chalban, I don't know if people here have heard of the Chalban. I've quoted him in the past, I don't know. The Chalban was a Jew. His name was Rav Chaim Cohn. He was, his Sfarim are called Tal Lechaim, and on the bottom it says the Chalban, Milashon Chalav. He was a milkman. He was a Makubal in Israel. He, wore like short sleeve, blue or purple button-down shirts, a couple buttons open, a Kangol hat, and he was mamish like, he was a Makubal that everybody in Eretz Yisrael held up. Their pictures, that they put in like the Frum magazines of like all the Rebbes and the Rosh Yeshiva sitting at like the dais, and like this one little like Saba looking guy, he was there. He was mamish. His Torahs are the sweetest thing. You can actually go on YouTube and you can watch his shiurim. It's like an easy Hebrew. We speak slowly. They're like 2 hours long. It's like the craziest thing. I've never watched a whole shiur. I just click play and just like watching him, because he mamish. It's like a cute little Saba, a big kippah, and he just goes. And sometimes he sings and he claps in the middle. He was unreal. But he was called the Chalban because he worked on a dairy farm. He was one of the biggest Mikubalim in Israel, and he made cheese during the day. It's like a crazy thing. 10 years ago, apparently, Rav David Abu Chasera sent like his son to his little house in Tel Aviv and knocked on the door. He said, my father said it's time to like come out to the world. That like everyone should know who you are. I don't know what that means, but again, he writes the sweetest Torah in the world. It's so good. There's no Torah that I've read that makes me connect more to Klal Yisrael than the Chalban's Torah, and it's amazing. So he has the following idea. He says, if you step back for a second and think about the Dharma, it Pasha doesn't make sense. Right? Every single mitzvah that we have, every single Aveira that we have has a reason to it. Okay, so Para Aduma is like Zos Chukas HaTorah. It's the one that we don't know the reason, and everybody in their Babi, all the Mefarshim are trying to explain like, what's the reason for Para Aduma, But we have the Sefer Achinuch, and we have Tamei Mitzvos, and there are reasons to mitzvos, and even the mitzvos that we don't understand, the real chukim, like, why can't we wear shatnez? I don't know, Hashem has a reason for it. Why can't we eat nevela? I don't know, Hashem in his understanding, Kiviyachol, knows that we shouldn't be doing this thing. So every single mitzvah has a particular reason. So we have 613, right? 248 positive, 365 negative, and all of a sudden what? I'm going to drink this Gatorade. 614? 249? Like, what's going on? I'm God. I get to play God? Right? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how does that work? And especially if you're more connected to the Sifrei Chasidus and Sifrei Kabbalah, that every single mitzvah corresponds to a different part of the body, and there are 248 positive mitzvahs that correspond to the 248 limbs in our body, and what's going on? That I can create a new thing for me. So the Chabad says we have like a tzura to this. We have like an idea, because Bezdin, Chazal, they're able to create or institute takanos. They're allowed to decree, they're allowed to be gozer certain gezeros upon the tzibor. Yes, there are limitations to that, right? The Gemara in Baba Kama says you can't be gozer a gezerah she'in hatzibor yachol lamod bo. If the community can't hack it, if they won't be able to do it, so then we drop it. I always think, currently, I don't know where this video is going to be posted, but I always think when the CRC says you can't have Starbucks, sometimes I think that's like a gezerah she'in hatzibor yachol lamod bo, you know? You go out, you finish the 7:15 minyan, and like half the minions on the drive-through line, you know? Okay, fine, whatever. I don't think anyone from the CRC is going to watch this. But anyway, the point is that Bezdin has certain limitations, but we still see that they're able to be gozer certain things. So, says the Chalban, what are nidarim? Nidarim is Hashem telling you that you have to be your own Bezdin. Meaning nobody knows you better than you know yourself. No one knows your challenges, no one knows your struggles, no one knows your Yetzer Hara more than you. So if there's a certain thing that you always struggle with, right? It's not crazy to take a neder. You know, I was talking to one of my Rabbonim, Rabbi Mayer Simcha told me that there was a guy who was trying to lose weight for a long time, and he was struggling every single diet. He kept on, cheating or not keeping to, whatever. So the guy's like a very frum guy, though, so he took a neder that he's not going to eat chocolate or chocolate cake, and he lost 30 pounds. I really was just like, I don't recommend that. It's not like a thing we should be doing. But I'm saying that story to highlight, to bring out this fact that like we know ourselves more than anybody else knows us, right? So in the world of like psychology, they talk about behavioral architecture or behavioral engineering, right? So if you're a person who snacks late at night, so this is like something that they use in the world of addiction, but like if you're a person who will use snacking at night, that's not the craziest thing. It's probably something that I do. I don't know. I assume a lot of people do too, whatever. But if you're a person who snacks late at night on chips, so then what do? You have to engineer your environment. Like make sure there are no chips in the house. Make sure you have healthier options. Make sure you have, dried fruit in the house to like munch on or something like that, right? So no one knows you better than you know yourself. So says the Chalban that ultimately what? Ultimately, nidarim is Hashem telling you that you have to trust yourself in your understanding of yourself. And you have to be able to say, at least in theory, I want to refrain from this, or I'm taking an neder that I'm going to do this. And I think it's incredibly important to think about this idea as we, find ourselves approaching Tisha B'Av. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that there are three things that happen or that come behesach hadas. Hesach hadas is without paying attention to it. And one of those things is Ben David, Mashiach is going to come behesach hadas. Which is like so weird. Why is it so weird? First of all, like when I was a little kid, like in school, like sometimes we're going to have no Lashon Hara week. Everyone's going to not speak Lashon Hara from like 5 to 6 p.m. when you get home from school. And if we all do that, like Mashiach's going to come. It's like, okay, we get to school the next day. It's like Mashiach's not here. Like, who spoke Lashon Hara? Like, no. But like, I don't know, that's not like the best chinuch move to say like if we all daven with kavanah or we all bench, from a bencher out loud, Mashiach's going to come. But I feel like you hear that in the context of chinuch, like we talk about doing things to bring geula. So how are you going to bring geula if you're thinking about it? The Gemara says it's going to come behesach hadas. And it's especially weird if you open up the back of your siddur, or after Shacharis, that there are 13 animamims. And the 12th one is what? That I believe that Mashiach is going to come. And even if he delays, I'm still going to wait for him. And not only that, Lishuascha kivisi Hashem ki. What do we say in Shemona Esrei? Kivinu kol hayom. The brisker Rav would always, the entire day, I don't know how many times there's been like a Breslov Shira and the brisker Rav was ever quoted in that, but okay, fine. I think it's good to bring worlds together. But the brisker Rav would be saying, Lishuascha kivisi Hashem the entire day. If he wasn't learning, if he wasn't talking to someone, he was walking, he would just be thinking like, Hashem's going to bring the Geula. So how does the Gemara say, Behesach hadas, Geula's going to come? If we're always thinking about, people are like, even some people wave, yellow flags, and Mashiach's already here, right? So like, how is it going to come? We need to be Behesach hadas, so shouldn't we stop talking about it? So the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says the best Torah. The Baal Shem Tov writes, I think it's Parshas Vayigash, Vayichi, when Yaakov Avinu is dealing with his sons, right, at the end of his life, and he's giving them each brachos. And to recognize what their own personal avodah is. So the Baal Shem Tov says, Mashiach is going to come when we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu behesach hadas. Meaning, if we stop thinking about what everyone else is doing, we stop thinking about how other people are running their lives, and we stop thinking about how other people are serving our Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? You go to a simcha and you see what they did, and you think, oh my gosh, like, now I have to do something. They made a kiddush like this, I have to make a kiddush like that. Or you go to a house for Shabbos, like, this is what they serve. Oh, I can't believe we're not doing that. What are people, like, who cares? You're doing your thing. You're running your life. You're supposed to be the best version of yourself and nobody else. And there have been like a million times where I go to shul, and it's like the big stage Torah. I see like a guy davening next to me, and he's davening a million times better than me. I'm like, oh gosh, like, maybe I should be more like that guy. Like, what's he doing? What siddur is he using? How is he shuckling? Like, when does he put his talis over his head? When does he take his talis over his head? And I'm not even thinking about my davening anymore. I'm just thinking about that guy and how he's a million times better than me, right? But if you have Yishuv Hadas, right, what we started with, if you have Yishuv Hadas and think like what I'm doing is good, and I'm doing the right thing, and I know me, and I know myself, so then you're able to serve Hashem behesach hadas. The only way Geula is going to come if we're mesiach das from everything else going on in our lives. When I was younger, I never ever understood for the life of me. I'm a big sports fan. I used to be an even bigger sports fan, but I still follow sports. And I was very into the Olympics. I'm not like the most patriotic guy in the world, but I think it's like very cool. I think there's like this notion of I'm a mute, like we were talking about. Fine. The one thing I Pasha never ever understood was track. Not because I'm like slow and I'm not good at running, which is true, but I never understood. I always thought in the 100 meters, the guy in the inner circle was always going to lose. Right? The guy on the outside looked like he was way ahead at the beginning of the race, and the guy on the inside. So what's pshat? Right? Why is it a staggered start like that? Everyone's running 100 meters. Everyone's running the same 100 meters. It's just a matter of where you start from. The track is wider, so you start a little bit further ahead. But I never got that. But I think that's the biggest yesod in Avodas Hashem. Because sometimes you look to the right of you, you look to the left of you, and you think, oh, that guy is so much further ahead of me in life. He's better at davening, she's better at chesed, she calls more people, this guy wakes up earlier than me to learn, he does his daf yomi, I'm always trying to catch up from 2 daf, and you think I'm never going to catch that guy in life. And then there's sometimes where the gaiva sneaks in, and we look to the left of us, that guy, he comes in after Baruch Hu every day for Shachris, or, I go to the daf and he only listens to the Shira at night, or something like that. We think I'm a much better friend because I called her after she had a baby and I signed up I made the meal train and she only signed up to make so we get to I'm the man because, she's to the left of me, he's to the left of me. But it's the silliest thing in the entire world. Why? Because we're all running 100 meters. And sometimes you look at a different race, right? You just have to run your race in life. If you serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu behesach hadas, you're mesiach das from everything else going on. So then you have Yishuv Hadas and what your avodah is. And not only that, the Ein Yaakov, one of the Mefarshim in the Gemara there, says that not only do we have to be mesiach das from what other people are doing, you have to be mesiach das from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. What does that mean? Don't forget about Hashem chas v'shalom. But the idea is leave a Kadosh Baruch Hu's cheshbonos to Hashem. Oh, Mashiach's going to come after 6,000 years. Mashiach's going to come when we keep 2 Shabbosos in a row. Mashiach's going to come. There are a bunch of Meimari Chazal, and there are a bunch of different things that Rebbes have said. But don't play God, says the Ein Yaakov. Hashem runs the world. We're supposed to follow Shulchan Aruch. We're supposed to keep halacha. We're supposed to be a good person. We're supposed to be kind. Follow the 5th Shulchan Aruch, right? You do that, things are going to be okay. It's only when we start to begin to play God and we say, if we have that 1 hour of Lashon Hara and everyone, does this thing or everyone doesn't do that thing, if everybody filters their iPhone, then Gula is going to, I'm not sure. I think Hashem knows when Mashiach is going to come. We have to follow Shulchan Aruch. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be a good person. We're supposed to keep halacha, be committed to the Torah and Hashem's values. And that's ultimately the greatest way to bring the Geula. And not only that, I'll just mention that's the greatest source of simcha also, right? When you're running your race, when you stop trying to be someone else, when you feel comfortable in your own skin, there's no greater simcha than that. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing to think about. The Torah tells us that when the Mishkan was inaugurated in Parsha Shmini, so the Torah says that that day was a simcha that was akin to the simcha of Brias HaOlam, when Hashem created the world. So that's a funny thing, what simcha was there during Yemei Bereshis? What kind of simcha was there? So the Medrash explains that when Hashem created the world, nothing was created flippantly or without purpose. Everything had a reason. Everything was very, it was created with intent. And the Svarim explained that when Hashem did that, when everyone had their specific role, so everyone knew what they were doing. So when the Mishkan was built and the Kohanim were doing their avodah and Levim were doing their avodah and the Israelim were set up around the Mishkan, all contributing in their own way, there was no greater simcha. When you're not trying to be anybody else and you say, I'm Mayer Simcha and I'm going to try to just be the best version of myself today, so there's no greater simcha because you're not comparing it. Relativity creeps in all too often. And that's what saps our simcha sachayim, because we're comparing ourselves to other people. Right? This is related. The Arizal talks about this also at length around Purim. He talks about Amalek, and Amalek is Gematria Safek, right? And there's an idea, I don't think it's a chazal, I think it's an idea people say that there's no greater simcha than hataras asfekos, than the undoing of a doubt. Meaning when you have clarity, there's no greater simcha than that. And I think that's this idea also. Anytime that we begin to doubt ourselves because we're comparing ourselves to other people, we lack simcha sachayim. We feel unbalanced, we feel a lack of tranquility like we started with. But if we begin to just run our race and focus on what we're supposed to do, so there's no greater simcha, and that's ultimately what's going to bring the geula. That's ultimately what's going to allow us to bring geula. And I don't think it's crazy to be looking. I think it's very normal. Not just I don't think it's crazy. I think it's like the most normal thing to be looking at other people. That's like human nature, and it's not entirely bad. Sometimes we look at other people for inspiration, right? There's this idea of kinas sofrim. We look to other people to say, wow, he or she does this. We read maybe biographies of certain people. I'm obsessed with the Lubavitcher Rebbe biography by Telushkin and Shlomo Freifeld and Rav David Trenk. There's so many good biographies, and I'm never gonna touch them. But it's aspirational in a way. It's like, wow, people did that. Like, that is so cool that we have Jews like that. It used to make me feel terrible, but then I heard someone say, if you were playing pickup basketball and Kobe Bryant was on your team, so you'd probably be pretty happy. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you probably wouldn't shoot so much, but you'd win every game, so you'd stay on the court, right? I was like, yeah, I guess so. Why? He's like, so why would you ever feel there's certain gedolim? So if you're not a gadol, they're part of Klal Yisrael. They're on your team. These are our heroes. These are who we're looking up to. Okay, so you're not like them. That's fine. You have a different role on the team. That's okay too, right? But we look, and I think that's this idea. Rebbe Nachman talks about this, that a person has to become a baki in Ratzav V'Shov. That yearning and that coming back. And I think it's critical to come back, because I think everybody's looking around. I don't think everyone is a baki in the settling, in the Yeshiva Das. Ratzav V'Shov, to settle, the same lashon as Yeshiva Das. We're always looking at other people, and I think it's normal, and I think it's human nature too. But I think it's more critical to highlight the shov, the coming back, to appreciating who you are and what you're all about. And taking those breaks to kind of reset, hit the restart button a little bit. The summer is very, I'm lucky because I'm a teacher, so I'm off in the summer, and I know for people, I hate saying this because people are like, oh, you're a teacher, you get to take off in the summer. Obviously, the summer is more calm for you. But I think the summer, it's light out, even though it's night, you can put the kids to sleep, and you can go sit out on the porch or sit out on the front lawn and just relax and think about life a little bit. And there's an awesome story, speaking of biographies, in the Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky biography, where he said that he was Rosh Yeshiva in Torah Das in New York, and one of his last and favorite contributions he made to the yeshiva was setting up the Camp Or Shraga, named after Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich, the one who started the Torah Das Yeshiva. And they would go, they'd take the whole camp, the whole yeshiva to this camp, and it was a little bit more relaxed. They would learn, they'd play ball, they'd do things like that. And Rabbi Yaakov said, you have to understand, the Torah is written with psikos, meaning there are breaks in the Torah. Right? So after the end of a parsha, the end of a perek, the end of a sefer, there are breaks in the line. But Rabbi Yaakov said something amazing. He said the breaks are as important as the words. Because if a sefer Torah is missing a letter, missing a word, so it's puzzle. But Rabbi Yaakov said people don't know this, but if it's missing a psik, if it's making a break, it's also puzzle. Meaning the breaks are as important. Sometimes you have to stop, and we're always running to accomplish and do more and be more involved. And that, again, that leads us to looking at different people and different things. But you have to pause for a second and just chill out. And come back to you, come back to who you are, come back to what you're all about. And then, once you take that pause and you're able to reset, so then you can go back to the ratzah. You can go back to the running, the yearning to try to become better and do more. But if we're always running, and we never stop to think, what lane am I in? Right? To go back to that mushal on the track. so then we're missing the point. We're not becoming the best versions of ourselves. And I think that's ultimately the idea. Yeshiva Das that we started with from Rebbe Nachman, Yeshiva Das is the most important thing that we can do to make sure that we're trying to accomplish and fulfill our mission in this world. Right? Again, we started with pocket presents. There are a million things that we're trying to do. There are a million different obligations that we have. There are different things that we want to accomplish. Maybe it's not like an obligation, but it's something that is nice I would like to do. And they're all coming at us. And are we able to kind of have that pocket presence, to have that Yeshiva Das and stay focused on the goal? It's not to say that I'm not going to deal with that. I am going to deal with it. But right now, what's my immediate goal? What's my immediate goal? What's the task at hand? When you have that sort of Yeshiva Das in your own Avodas Hashem, and you're also Mashgiach Das from what other people are doing and what other people are focusing on, so that's going to allow you to be the best version of yourself. And I'll just share, I think we have a couple minutes left, right? So I'll just share this idea from Maharal because I thought this was super cool. The Maharal has a sefer here called Netzach Yisrael, which is all about Galus and Geula. And I stumbled upon a piece here where he talks about a Gemara that, I don't know if it's a well-known Gemara, but the Gemara in Sanhedrin has a story where they were asking a bunch of the Amoraim, what's the name of Mashiach? Right? Mashma, what's his name? And they all gave their own name. It's kind of like a funny thing. They're like, oh, who do you think Mashiach's name is? Like, oh, Mayer Simcha. They didn't even say me. That's my name. Like, I'm going to talk in third person, you know? Like, what's going on? So the Maharal says that Mashiach, Melech HaMashiach is going to have all the milos. He says, Yihiyeh ma'alaso kollelas kol ha'milos. What does that mean? It's going to have all the milos, right? Maybe I feel like they say that in like Shidduchim, like, oh, the girl, she has all the milos, right? Stuff like that. Like, what does it mean? Mashiach's going to have all the milos. So he says that Avram Avinu was Avram Ish Chesed. He had Chesed, Gemilas Chasadim, that was his thing. And Yitzchak Avinu was Gevura, and it was Avoda, and that was his thing. And Yaakov Avinu was Torah, maybe it was Tiferes, that was his thing. Mashiach is going to have all of those, says the Maharal. To the degree that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had it, he's going to have it all. Right? So he says, what does it mean when every single one of these Amorim said their own name? So he said, when every single person is shalom in themselves and every single person does their avoda bishleimos and becomes the best version of themselves, when Mayer Simcha contributes to the geula shlema, I do everything Mayer Simcha is supposed to do. So then Mashiach's going to come because he's Kollel hakol. But it's dependent upon what? Each person doing and becoming the best version of themselves. Why is it that Reb Shila said, oh, his name is Shiloh? Shiloh Shemo. It's going to be Shiloh. Why? Because I know when I become the best version of myself, that's when Geula is going to come. When we all do the best that we can individually, and we're not saying, oh, let other people take care of it, let other people, No, when we focus on our own avoda, when we know what we have to do, and we do that thing, we become the best version of ourselves, so then that's what it means that Mashiach is Kollel hakol. When everyone is doing their thing, so he collects it all together and just brings it up. However that's going to manifest itself, I'm not exactly sure. But the idea that the Maharal is saying is that we all have to become the best version of ourselves. And I think that's an incredibly powerful thing, and I think the only way that can happen is we have, again, this Yeshiva Das. I'll keep coming back to that Rebbe Nachman started with, that the most important thing, right, the thing that takes us away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and distances us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and prevents us, as he said, from coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the beginning, was a lack of Yeshiva Das. This Pizur HaNefesh of just totally feeling like scatterbrained and not able to, do the thing that we need to do. But if we have that sense of Yeshiva Das, so then we can become the best version of ourselves, and we can ultimately hopefully bring the Geula Shlema. Okay? Thank you everyone so much for coming.